An iconic landmark on Oahu for more than 90 years, the Waikīkī Natatorium War Memorial was built to honor those from Hawaii who served and died in World War I. The pool and bleachers have been closed for more than a generation due to neglect and decay. A new plan has surfaced to restore the structure, but at significant cost. Some say it's worth it, others disagree. What do you think? Join the conversation on Insights tonight on PBS Hawaii.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. Duke Kahanamoku inaugurated the Waikīkī Natatorium War Memorial in 1927 when he dove into the pool and was the first person to swim in it. Although the pool remained open for the next 52 years, it was plagued almost immediately with poor drainage and water circulation problems. Yet 1 year after it was closed in 1979, it was placed on the National Register of Historic Places and has continued to garner national recognition as an historic site. The government and community have been arguing for years over what to do with the war memorial, proposing everything from demolition to full restoration. A new proposal was put on the table a month ago. Is this the answer everyone has been looking for? Our guests tonight include representatives from both the government and the community, as well as an expert on the potential impact of climate change on the shoreline area. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Robert Croning is the director of the Honolulu City and County's Department of Design and Construction. He is a professional engineer by training. Dolan Eversole is the Waikīkī Beach Management Coordinator for the University of Hawaii Sea Grant College Program. He's a coastal geologist. Kirsten Faulkner is the Executive Director of the Historic Hawaii Foundation, an organization that oversees all aspects of preservation programs in Hawaii. And James Bickerton is an attorney for the Kaimana Beach Coalition, an organization of Kaimana Beach users whose mission is to protect the last local beach on Oahu's South Shore from development and commercializations. Let's start off with Kirsten Faulkner from Historic Hawaii. Could you kind of walk us through the history of the natatorium and why it was built and why such a facility as opposed to just an obelisk or something?
Thank you, Daryl. If I could set the stage a little bit, World War I was one of the most horrific events of the 20th century, and for generations, it's really shaped how we think about world engagement and war. After the war ended in 1918, there was a worldwide effort to remember, honor the dead, but also to say we don't want this to happen again. So war memorials popped up all around the world, but they were different than war memorials that we had seen before, from the Napoleonic Wars or the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, the obelisk you mentioned. The idea was to have living memorials, places where community members could gather, where they could engage in community activities and socializing. They called it the living memorials because the idea was the living would remember why they were able to enjoy the life that we have. So Hawaii, at the time the territory of Hawaii, decided that this living memorial was necessary to honor the sons and daughters of Hawaii who had served in the Great War. There was a design competition. The territorial legislature established the parameters where it would be, that it would include a swimming course of at least 100 meters, and they brought an architectural review panel to choose the design.
Let me ask a quick question. Was the fact that we had this famous waterman, world famous waterman, Duke Kahanamoku, famous at the time, part of the motivation of having this kind of a place?
Having a recreational center for swimming, for water sports, was very much a part of it. At the time, there weren't a lot of swimming pools. Natatorium means indoor swimming pool, and so it was a place for that kind of activity to occur. And certainly, Duke Kahanamoku, as an Olympian who put Hawaii on the map for world water sports, was certainly part of it.
Robert Croning from the City and County. Now, what happened? We mentioned that there was, right from the beginning, there were some mechanical issues with it, but what happened over time to it, and what's the current condition?
Well, I think it's pretty clear the current condition is unacceptable. I mean, it's a blight on the city, on Waikīkī. The original construction behind it, I think within 2 years, it started to decay and show some signs of wear already. And through the years, it's gone through several different efforts to repair it some, and it keeps, decaying even more. And until 1979, when it was in such a bad state that it was just closed for good. So the problems with it right now are pretty much the visual blight that it provides, that it shows, and then there's some health and safety issues with it too, because it's falling apart into the water and pieces are crumbling off. So,
Do we have a problem with people going on there that shouldn't be there, or is it pretty secure?
I don't think there's been a lot of problems like that. A seal got in there recently, the monk seal, right?
Yeah.
So they get in there when they shouldn't. But there hasn't been a lot of problems with people jumping over the fence and getting in there.
Jim Bickerton, what's the position of the Kaimana Beach Coalition when it comes to what should happen there?
Well, I think first and foremost, we're really interested in making sure that whatever goes in there is open to the public and free. And that's a big deal. There's very few beaches left that local people can access, and that beach sits at the bottom of Ahupua'a that is probably the most densely populated on the island. So literally thousands and thousands of people use that beach. It's one of the few beaches you can get to, you can park, you can get in the water without having to go past hotels or rights of way or belong to a private club. We're very concerned that any of these proposed solutions, particularly those that have public-private partnerships, someone wants something in return, and that usually involves a turnstile, a ticket booth, money changing hands, and that's usually the end of public, open, free beach access.
You know, during the run-up to this show, and for many years, there are people who you represent who feel strongly that it should either be knocked down or just moved and just have the memorial stand by itself and restore the beach, right?
Well, yeah, the thinking behind that is that, you know, if you look around this island, there's no public-private partnership on a county beach park. That's the one thing that the corporations and businesses haven't been able to get their hands on. So we know that's a tried and tested model if you want to preserve open, free space at the shoreline. This is the most valuable shoreline the city owns. I mean, it's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, you know, if it were to be developed. So we think that the beach park is the way to go, but we're very mindful of preserving history and trying to accommodate both interests. So that's why we favored moving the arches back inland, keeping it as a memorial. The real attraction for the commercial interests are those bleachers. They seat 2,500 people, and the EIS actually talks about putting a stage, a floating stage in the pool. You can see the tour buses coming down, the taxis, and, you know, someone who wants to go for a swim after work, where do they go?
Yeah, well, we'll talk some more about all the different proposals that have been floated, pardon the pun, I guess. But Dolan Eversole, what is the current status of the beaches there? I mean, we were talking earlier, but you mentioned that it may be one of the reasons Kaimana Beach, which is right next to it, is so stable is because of that existing wall created by the natatorium. It's become sort of almost a natural feature in its unnatural way, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think it's important to put this whole area in the context that it's completely man-made to begin with. Kaimana Beach is stable by its nature being right next to the natatorium. The diamond head, what we refer to as the diamond head wall of the natatorium, stabilizes Kaimana Beach, and anybody that's been there will know it's an extremely stable beach. It doesn't change much at all. So we have that to attribute to the existing diamond head wall. But even the natatorium and Queens Beach, and as you go through Waikīkī as a whole, it's entirely man-influenced, if not man-made. So this is yet one more man-made structure along the coast in Waikīkī. But to your point about Kaimana Beach, yes, it's the current configuration of Kaimana is largely dictated by the natatorium itself. So,
and then if you look, and we actually had a picture up that kind of shows this, on the town side of the natatorium, there's really no beach at all. It's just open reef for the most part, right?
That's right. The area right in front of the aquarium has really no beach whatsoever. It's shallow reef. Not a great recreational resource as far as swimming and beach going, unless you get in the swim channel that's there. But that's a classic example of buildup of sand on the updrift side of a structure and the loss of beach on the downdrift side.
Yeah, we're looking at that picture right now, and it's interesting to me that you look at pulling that feature out of the beach. Does anybody know really what would happen?
There are ways to model that. If you talk to enough experts, you'll start to get a general consensus on what could happen. But I think there's pretty general agreement that we don't want to remove the diamond head groin because that will have a negative impact to Kaimana Beach, almost certainly. And I think the EIS and all the studies I've read have recognized that. So I'm personally not that concerned about destabilizing Kaimana Beach with anything I've seen thus far because it does retain that diamond head end of the groin.
Kirsten Faulkner from the Historic Hawaii Foundation, what has been historically your folks' position on what should happen with the natatorium? And when you hear what Dolan Eversole is saying about it being sort of an unnatural condition, I mean, has that, what have you folks argued should happen with that natatorium over the years?
We've always said that it should be preserved, and part of preservation is first stabilizing it. Robert mentioned its deteriorating condition and the fact that it's unsafe. So certainly stabilizing it, part of it is that diamond head seawall and holding the sand in place. But beyond that, there's opportunities to, we call it rehabilitation, which is to bring it back into useful life while retaining its historic character and the design features. One of the things I'm excited about with this new alternative is that it keeps that historic character, but it really re-engineers the swim basin portion of what's under the water surface, right? So the way it works is fixed so that it's ocean fed and powered by the waves, but the look and the feel and the features are retained. So I think that hybrid approach is really powerful and actually a very elegant solution to the problems that we've been talking about.
Let me read some comments that are now coming in from our audience. Again, looking back at the history, I support it, I guess retaining it. It is an iconic landmark, and those who are around to enjoy it remember it fondly. My great-grandmother dedicated it to my great-grandfather after he died, so it has family as well as historical significance for me. Jim Bickerton, let me ask you, when you have advocated for changing this facility, what kind of pushback do you get from the people who just feel like it's just too precious to mess with in that way?
We, you know, actually the newspaper periodically runs the poll on this question, and I know it's not scientific, but the majority and first place position is typically the County Beach Park option. So I haven't found tremendous pushback except from, I would say people, it's certainly older people, maybe, have to some extent, but the current generation, we don't see that at all. And they recognize that the times change and this is a much more densely populated. You think about when the natatorium was built, there was only 2 hotels in Waikīkī. So there was this wide expanse. You didn't have to just tie up this land. It's a big thing, the size of a football field. Now that the hotels and buildings have hedged us all in, and now everyone's scrambling to get their little corner where they can get to the ocean, I think people worry less about using that much space for the memorial. You don't need to, no one else in Honolulu has that kind of space.
You know, throw out it for all of you, Robert Croning, first of all, when you came in to start working at the city and inherited this situation, what kind of ideas were being thrown around and what kind of conflicts did you find, political conflicts? One question I want to read from a viewer, will this be the decade the decision is made on the future of the natatorium? We've been arguing about this 30 plus years, 40 years.
No, that's true, and unfortunately there are a lot of things we could laugh about on this, but it's really, it is sad that it's still in this condition. So when I took over, one of the nice things about my role in this is that I can truly just remain objective. So, you know, some of the things that Jim's been talking about on preferences, so forth, and you know, the feedback he gets has turned it into a beach versus. I see that's part of the analysis, but there's so much more to it than that. When I inherited this, as you mentioned, it was at a point where many attempts had been made to do something. There were made lots of progress to come close to demolishing it, I think in the 50s. Then there was another effort that was going to restore it in the 90s, in the early 2000s, and it was going to be fully restored, and then that didn't happen. And so I got it, and the current mayor, and there are politicians through time, some of them wanted to keep it away from them and not touch it at all, and others said, no, I'm going to try to tackle this. So Mayor Caldwell has decided he thinks it's something needs to be done, because that's most of the feedback. Everybody, no matter what side you're on, pretty much says something needs to be done, right? That's the common theme everybody says, and then we diverge from there. So I just look at it in what's the best for the city and county of Honolulu and for the people of Oahu. And so I do it objectively, and that's where the EIS helps in doing the analysis. So
We're going to go back to that a little bit. I want to first, so we did go out and talk to some of the people who actually use the beach over there and got a couple of interesting opinions, and let's listen to that tape right now.
Beach volleyball.
Can you explain? What do you mean beach volleyball?
Yeah, just fill it in with sand and put up a couple of nets, and you just have beach volleyball. They got it down by walls, and it's a big event now.
Personally, I'd like to see it restored. I remember my grandfather was captain of the lifeguards here in the 40s, and it was, even back then, it was to keep it up, to maintain it, it was a big job back then. But now, in its present condition, you're looking at a big expense, I think. So, but it would be nice to be able to keep the majority of it that's here that you see.
We did get a caller asking exactly, why don't they convert the pool to a beach volleyball dual court? What kind of ideas other than that have been explored or floated over the years?
Well, some of the ones we've heard, of course, are the volleyball court. I've heard of dolphin shows, about hula shows. You mentioned the floating platforms for performances. I mean, there's been lots of just kind of brainstorming and concepts, and people saying, wouldn't it be great if? What's nice, and Robert mentioned this, but the environmental impact statement really is more about what's feasible, about what's technically appropriate, what meets all the standards and criteria. And just someone sitting around saying, hey, let's grow coral polyps there or something, that's not something that meets all of those standards and criteria. So I think it's exciting and fun when people start to say, what if this, what if that? But when it really comes down to what's possible, what meets our goals as a society, what can we afford, what honors the veterans, what protects the environment, what provides public access, all of those things need to be weighed and balanced.
Jim Bickerton, when these hula shows and floating shows and all these other things have been proposed, it's usually because of the need for revenue to maintain it, because once you invest in this, it's going to have to be maintained. And that sounds like exactly what you've been concerned about, is that someone will turn to a commercial activity there in order to maintain the facility.
That's really almost inevitable when you realize how big it is and how much money it takes to run the expense, just the annual expenses, but also the capital improvement. Where does that money come from? The mayor in his very first press conference mentioned we're looking for a public-private partnership. That's a code, and it's not a very well-disguised code these days. We know what that means. It means branding it means having corporate sponsors, and then they want something back. And that's something that really people should be on their guard about, because there isn't another stretch of beach left that we can all move to when we want to go for our recreation in Honolulu. Just the regular people who just want to get in the ocean after a hard day's work. We all have very cramped housing. One of the things about living in paradise is we say, well, we can go to the beach at least. Mm-hmm. If you can't do that, what's the point?
Another viewer weighs in, restore the War Memorial and keep the oceanfront natural. Don't let money-hungry developers get their hand on it. Let me ask, though, Dolan Eversole, when you have a structure that's stuck out in the ocean like this, what are the pressures? How difficult is it to maintain something like that? Are there I mean, are we doomed to have a structure that is always going to be very expensive to maintain?
Well, I guess that would depend on how it's constructed. One thing I can say is it would be near impossible to build a new structure like what we have there now. It's, the regulatory world that we live in would really not allow a lot of the structures that we see in Waikīkī now. We used to dredge the reef in Waikīkī to make swim areas. You'd be thrown in jail if you did that now. So there is that element to this project where it was done in a time when you could do those things, and would be really difficult, if not impossible, to create a new one. Not to say you couldn't replace it, but to create a whole brand new one would be really impossible. But as far as the construction and the maintenance, depending on how it's constructed, there are much better building techniques than there were in 1927, of course. So we would expect this to last a lot longer. I'm not an engineer, so I can't speak to how much maintenance would be required, but if it's a typically, concrete and marine grade construction, there would be probably some maintenance occasionally, but depending on how it's designed, it should withstand fairly well. What I will say, however, is our coastline is subject to a number of natural hazards, including tsunamis and hurricanes, and the inevitable sea level rise, which is creeping on us. So those are all factors that need to be kind of thought about and designed for. You're not going to be able to hold back a tsunami, but you might be able to design it so there might be giveaway sections that prevent the whole complete failure. We were just talking about that earlier, that one potential catastrophic event could destroy the whole thing, and that's true throughout Waikīkī.
Just in general terms, and I know Sea Grant doesn't want to take a particular position on the natatorium, but generally speaking, would you advise people to build structures on the shoreline anymore?
That's a great question, and I do a lot of work in Waikīkī, and as you know, there are ambitious plans to re-envision Waikīkī in different parts, and that's primarily focused on the beach. So we're very focused on being able to maintain, preserve, and in some cases restore beaches in Waikīkī. And I'd like to make the point that Waikīkī is different than other places for a whole bunch of reasons. It's an urban environment, it's an urban beach, and so I think it allows a little bit more flexibility on what's possible. For example, we probably would never think of building groins and seawalls and things like that at Sunset Beach on the North Shore. It's a dynamic, natural beach. So you can contrast North Shore to Waikīkī as kind of the two endpoint extremes. So I think in that context, it does allow a little bit more creativity in what's possible in a place like Waikīkī.
Okay, Mr. Croning, let's call for you. Who was on the committee to draft the plans for the perimeter deck? What was the motivation to come up with this plan? That's a pretty good question.
It's a great question, and actually I was wanting to jump in a couple times.
You're reading my question. You guys can all jump in anytime you want, so okay. Go ahead, yeah.
Because we're already talking about some of the alternatives and giving some opinions on that. So if I could at first, let me cover, first of all, the EIS has a breakdown of all the different alternatives, the environmental impact statement, which
let me roll you back just a little bit. So, frankly, I mean, I've read a lot of EISs over the years, and a lot of times they are sort of pointed toward, I won't say pointed toward a conclusion, but pointed toward a particular project. Was this EIS designed from the front end to lead to restoration of the natatorium?
Well, right. When you actually submit your EIS, you have to go in with a proposed, preferred alternative. And so that's been done, and the preferred alternative we now have is something that we call a perimeter deck. But if I could first talk about a few things, the concern about the private partnership, public partnership, I think the mayor did mention that in one of his meetings. And it's been taken, as Jim has said, to be understood as, well, that's going to be revenue generating type of an event. And in fact, that's not what he really meant. What he's talking about is hoping, and because there's been some nonprofits, some organizations that have said they're more than willing to support through funding it without any strings attached, because that's what they want. So if the alternative that we select is something that they support, I think there's some nonprofits out there that would like to help fund it. So that's kind of what he's talking about, private support in that way. Where I was leading to on the environmental impact statement and the analysis that's been done so far, it provides costs and a lot of the information about how much this is going to cost.
How much is it going to cost?
So right now, well, there's 4 alternatives. One of them, do nothing, which always has to be one. But it's basically, you've got this perimeter deck option that we're talking about. We've got the turn it into a beach option, and we've got restore it fully to where it even meets the pool rules options. That being the most expensive, because you've got all the mechanical systems and stuff that have to support that, and it's a full reconstruction. The next most expensive is actually the beach. So some of the things that Jim hasn't covered is there are maintenance requirements on the beach also. One of them being you have to bring in sand every once in a while and replenish the beach, which costs money and is very difficult to do. And there's other requirements. Capital costs, similar. The capital cost is actually a little more to turn it into a beach.
But I think that was a little bit rigged from our perspective. We read the numbers, and we think that there's a little fudging that went into that.
And that's fine. So that's why you have the environmental impact statement that you can make comments to say that. But I'm comfortable with the analysis, and the perimeter deck comes in a little bit less because we don't have to have all the mechanical systems. Where the beach, we have to build other structures, because if we take away the bleachers, we have to find a place and build a structure for the ocean safety folks that are in there. So when you talk about the costs and the maintenance concerns and then the private partnership, it's best to go look at the EIS and see all the data. Originally, our preferred alternative when we first went out with what we call the EIS preparatory notice, we had our preferred alternative was the beach, because the perimeter deck was not an option. So the EIS has a lengthy process of checking with all kinds of organizations and different agencies to get expertise information throughout. And as we went through what we call 6E consultation, which is this historic preservation type consultation, they basically said we really should look for an interim, a medium preservation option. The reason it wasn't in there to begin with is because when the project was stopped in 2000, it was basically stopped because it was designated a pool, and we couldn't meet the pool rules.
Let me know, what are we talking about here? We're talking about 30 million, we're talking about 50 million, 100 million?
We're talking about 25 million for the perimeter deck, up to 45-ish million for the full pool.
And then what was the beach alternative?
The beach alternative is about 28.
And then, Jim, you're saying that you feel like that's...
Let me give you a couple of examples that jumped out at us right away. First of all, there's 90 years of silt in that pool, and it's completely anaerobic. There hasn't been any current in there. There's a lot of bad stuff on the bottom, if you will. The beach proposal has a mitigation expense for that. There's a way that they're going to cover that and put sand over it. The pool, they don't do that. They leave that out. Now, the way they're going to build the pool...
So you're saying it'd be more expensive to... You're saying that it'd be more expensive to do this restoration project than the EIS is saying?
Yes, and I mean, and the other thing they're going to do, they don't have mitigation for... They're going to drive piles into this muck to build this deck, this perimeter deck. There's no mitigation for that. It's just going to spread out into Waikīkī. You're going to disturb all that silt. Another example is they say the pool only requires 4 lifeguards. That's where they get the maintenance expense, but the beach will require 5. But Kaimana Beach next door just has 1 lifeguard station, and this beach isn't going to be any bigger than Kaimana. I mean, we don't see 5 lifeguard stations in a 200-yard stretch of beach.
Okay, let me get back. Now let's talk technically, though. So the city is now, as I understand it, picked its favorite, right? I mean, of all those alternatives. I mean,
if you want to call it that way. That's why I say, for my job, I remain objective. And for me, it's not a matter of favored or not, because it's not emotional. It's a matter of what I think is the appropriate selection out of all the alternatives to do with this.
If you would mind, go ahead and describe how this alternative would work and why you think it will work and survive all of the things that we're talking about that are going to threaten, all the seaward pressures and stuff.
Why would it work as a
structure?
As an engineering structure?
Yeah, in fact, we have a couple of schematics that we can put up if that'll help you explain it.
Right. Well, I think the
So we're showing a picture up here, right? This is a current status.
Right, that's the current status.
And what are we seeing there?
So that is the EVA-facing side of the natatorium right now.
So it's as if we're sitting on the beach and looking out at the ocean with that.
No, it's if you're sitting in the stands, it's on the right side, looking out into the ocean.
Okay.
Well, the main problem with the current design of the natatorium is that what you see in that photo is a pipe that goes through that rock formation. That was supposed to be the water flow, the natural water flow in the original design, and it wasn't sufficient enough, so it didn't really get the water to flow well enough. And then the other problems are the actual material, the concrete that they used was not of the standard that we use today. And the rebar that they used is iron-based, which will, and now we commonly use stainless steel rebar. So as far as an engineering adventure, we think the current materials that we have today and the ability and the work that we know how to do in waters and construction techniques today will have a much better chance of surviving in the water.
And then we can show you the second drawing is how it would be set up to allow water. So if you wouldn't mind describing what this looks like.
Well, so the main reason we came up with this alternative was, again, because SHPD was not happy when we only had two alternatives. One of either build a pool.
Preservation Division.
Historic Preservation Division wanted, we only had the turn it into a pool, which is very expensive and lots of maintenance with mechanical systems and so forth, or the beach. And they said, well, we want you to look at options that at least preserve a little more of the structure. And we actually went through two iterations. We went through once, basically took the beach but kept the bleachers, and everybody asked about that, said, no way. That's not an option. So we looked into it a little more and came up with this option, which was at first something that we didn't think might work because of the pool rules. The pool rules are a little vague. It defines a swimming pool as a man-made structure that contains a artificial body of water. Artificial body of water, that's all kind of subjective.
What's artificial anymore, right?
Exactly. So we didn't know whether something like this would even be accepted by DOH as a pool. But we came up with this. This allows, so what you see here is the wall now doesn't come all the way down to that rock formation, and it allows water to flow through, so it'll circulate much better. And then what you don't see here is the actual Mackay wall, which will be all basically a grate, allowing water to flow in and out and flow in and out. And when we presented this to DOH, they said, yes, this would not be classified as a pool, which then saves a lot of money and makes it a much more easy project for us to maintain.
And let me ask Kirsten from Historic Hawaii, this is changing it, but is this changing it too much for you folks?
That was a big point of discussion for all of us. There's the kind of extremes of tear it all down to keep it exactly as it was designed. And in between is basically this solution. It's a compromise. And I know there are people who think it's kind of gone too far the other way. I'm not among them. I think it really does save that character and that feel and that association that we all associate with the natatorium, while still addressing these issues of water quality, water safety, security, and being able to build it and manage it. So there have been some people who are concerned, but overall, I think it really has addressed all of the preservation issues that we've brought up.
Dolan Ebersol, I don't know if you had a chance to evaluate this scientifically, but does it satisfy you as a person concerned about the shoreline that it is a good compromise?
Well, I think that word compromise is a really good, this is an appropriate use of that. And as I read through the EIS, I saw repeated mention of pros and cons to the different designs. And I think that's something we all have to keep in mind, that is it perfect? Maybe not, but certainly there's benefits and there's drawbacks to every approach that you might take. As far as the beach goes, from a process standpoint, the preferred alternative I don't feel will have a negative impact on Kaimana Beach. If that's the ultimate concern, I think it'll remain as is. I do have a couple concerns about some of the more technical details with the grate. What does that grate look like? How does it work? But those are relatively easy questions as far as talking with the engineers and figuring out what does that really mean. So as far as backing up from a 10,000 foot level, how will this impact the beaches? I don't think it will have any really significant impact to the beach. There are some other concerns. Water quality is one of those. I do share the concern Jim has about the silt on the bottom. I think we need to look at that a little closer. But again, those are not deal killers necessarily. They're just things we need to look at a little more carefully.
So Jim Bickerton, what are you guys concerned about this design?
Well, if you're just focusing on the pool design itself, we do see some concerns. I mean, there was many years ago, and people forget this, a little boy on a school trip to the natatorium when it was still open drowned there, and they missed him. They didn't see him because it was so murky. And they got back to the school and discovered that he was missing. And that was why the pool rules were kicked in. And that anytime you have a public pool, it's calm. You attract the weakest swimmers. You know, those of us who want to go out in the surf, no problem, we'll go next door. But you get a lot of weak swimmers and visitors who are not familiar with the water. You have this untested anywhere in the world, as far as we know, this grid or mesh system. It has to be small enough so that little kids' hands don't get stuck in it, but big enough so that algae and barnacles and limu and all kinds of things don't grow on it. Those pipes that we were looking at, those big old pipes that went through the wall into the pool and drained it, I mean, the reason that the pool shut down is they filled up with marine organisms. So we're not clear that you're ever going to be able to build these mesh structures. And then what's the real maintenance cost of keeping those things clean in the ocean, making sure the pukas remain open for the flow that you need to have to avoid the buildup of bacteria. So that's why, again, it's like, why go to all this trouble when we have the solution all around this island of how to use our shoreline?
Robert Croning, so along the lines of what Jim is saying, a supporter of preservation, but says there needs to be an effort to make sure sharks don't get in the swimming area. This happened in the past. I mean, is there the public safety aspects that Jim Bickerton is raising? I mean, how does this plan address that? I find it interesting thought about when you create I don't think the term is legally, an attractive nuisance, where it looks really nice and safe, but maybe there's currents and stuff under there. I mean, are you sure it's going to be safe for the kids and the tourists and so on who want to go there?
Right. No, we're definitely going to design it for that. And as far as sharks, the mesh that we're talking about is actually a series of bars, and they'll go up and down. So there's not going to be a grid system that can catch anything. It'll be bars, and they'll be spaced at the right distance that none of these animals can fit in there. So
not a big enough one to do any damage.
Right. I'm sure jellyfish will be able to squeeze through or something, but there's jellyfish everywhere. So as far as the safety, of course, the lifeguards will be there, and if it gets to any point where it looks like it might be dangerous, like for some reason it's a turbid event, we can close the pool. So when it's too dangerous, we'll do that. But the probability of that happening, based on the analyses we've done in the area and how often the waves are rough and so forth, is infrequent, and so the pool will be open quite often. But there's no expectation that this pool is going to be the same type of pool that you would find at one of our parks, where it's just clear, and it's still ocean. And that's why it's an ocean flow. And so as people use it, that's what they have to expect.
Will you feel the current? Will it be more like being in the ocean than being in a pool, or more like pool than being in the ocean?
It'll be more like being in the ocean. I mean, you'll still feel some choppiness and some current here and there, yeah.
You know, when you talk about the climate change and especially sea level rise, how much sea level rise would you say that they should work into this design?
Well, I'm happy to say that the report, the EIS readily acknowledges sea level rise right in it, and they refer to the recent sea level rise risk and vulnerability assessment that the state of Hawaii just completed. So that's written right into the EIS. And to answer your question, it depends on your time frame. And the state is now starting to adopt benchmarks for sea level rise. And the magic number that is starting to, we're coalescing around is about 3.2 feet. And the magic question of that, of course, is when. And that's where it gets a little fuzzy. The recommendations coming out of the state of Hawaii now are we expect at least 3 feet by the end of the century, but we should be planning for it now because it's very likely it's going to happen much sooner than the end of the century.
So I'm sorry, I may have missed it. I know you said it. How much does the EIS envision?
They don't necessarily pick a benchmark. The EIS mentions that the sea level rise will be considered in the final design. So we're not at a place yet where there are any requirements that you build to a certain level or design for a certain sea level height. But the guidance coming out is about 3 feet. 3.2 feet is a minimum.
And the city has actually accepted that in all designs we do now. Every project that we're doing anywhere, and as the Director of Design and Construction, I've got about 600 of them I'm doing. They all have to take into consideration sea level rise now, and we're using that 3.2 number. So when we design this, that'll be taken into account.
I'm got several backup of questions here, and there's sort of a theme developing. People are wondering, okay, how are you going to maintain this thing? I think that I have got like 4 questions. Here's one that's pretty indicative. Maui resident believes Natatorium is iconic, rare, and unique and should be restored, but they should look into a commercial way to make money to fix it and not make it a burden to taxpayers. Another caller says, who is responsible for us getting to this place? They should be held responsible. You could also raise money through a GoFundMe or private foundation. So really, here's another proposal. We're getting a lot of calls, actually. Build an Olympic-sized pool on the Mauka side of the arcade and turn the existing pool into a beach. Let's just let's start from scratch.
Best of both worlds.
So let's just talk about that. I mean, realistically, the maintenance, I mean, can we afford to maintain this thing and without some sort of revenue stream?
Well,
I guess the
cheapest maintenance is to do nothing. But as most people agree, we have to do something. So whatever we do is going to require maintenance. All options require maintenance. It's a piece of property the city and county has to maintain. And whether it's maintaining a perimeter deck, whether it's maintaining a complete pool, or whether it's maintaining a beach, they all have costs and they all have requirements. So it's part of Parks' responsibility, or I think, if this ends up being a perimeter deck or a beach, then it becomes, Ocean Safety's responsibility to maintain.
Does Historic Hawaii Foundation, do you folks have money to help an organization like the city maintain an iconic site, or is there really revenue streams out there other than commercial?
One of the interesting things about having a solid proposal is we're going to find out. And I know there have been many funders and philanthropists over the years who have said, once you commit to a course of action, the philanthropy will be interested. And certainly there's more interest in fundraising to restore a war memorial than fundraising to destroy one. And I think that has been part of the conversation. The public-private partnership idea could be as extreme as the commercialization that Jim is concerned about, but it could also just be a philanthropic way to support places that matter. And I think when we talk about what are the values that we are trying to aspire to, it's not just about the cost. It's also about who are we as a community, who are we as a people, and what does that look like? So I'm interested in seeing what happens next. I think until there's a committed course of action, there's nothing to contribute to. So, restoring and taking care of a war memorial, I think, will attract a great deal of attention from across the world.
Jim Bickerton, you know, when we talk about this, I think that many of the folks in your coalition are swimmers. They go regularly and they swim the shoreline, and they have to go out past the natatorium to do that, I think, most of the time. But, I mean, couldn't it possibly be an asset to your constituents that there's this place you could go do laps in the ocean? Do you see anything positive about it is what I'm asking under this?
You can see, you know, I'm a fair-minded person and I can see positive in everything. What we're trying to do is look not just at the immediate, but looking far into the future.
Which is what we're talking about now.
Really thinking, I mean, I've taught 3 children to swim. My 3 kids I taught to swim there. And my hope is that, you know, their kids and their grandkids can have that same experience. And I don't see the solutions, the other solutions, producing that in the end because of this risk of commercialization.
Well, you say you taught them to swim at the beach,
Yeah.
not in the natatorium.
At the beach, not at the natatorium, right. I should have been clear about that. So, I mean, the swimmers have a great experience now. Can you tell them it's going to be better? You know, we all have this experience with our technology. We're going to make it better. And we're like, I like the first model better. It worked better. You know, so that's the fear that people have is like we're going to, and what Kirsten's talking about, this, I mean, I would challenge them all who say that to say, look, show me a $30 million project that was funded by just goodwill and philanthropists.
Sure.
Show me
Hawaii
that.
Theater, Pacific Aviation Museum, Bishop Museum.
Are there
But
are there no
dozens.
shows every night at the Hawaii Theater? That's my point. It isn't like it just gets to sit there and the public just gets to come and use it for free. There's a quid pro quo, and the
But
theater
let me
has
point
to
out
have
as well,
has to have tickets and
there's
people.
a cost to demolition and building a beach. So that $28 million also has to be paid for. Is the Kaimana Beach Coalition going to raise that money? How are you going to pay for that $28 million? So, you know, there is a baseline cost to do anything. We need to accept that there's a baseline cost to do anything. And then the delta is what we're really talking about. So, you know, when you talk about having this experience of swimming and teaching your children to swim, that doesn't go away. Kaimana Beach is still there. The Diamond Head seawall still holds that beach. You've lost nothing. And then by putting this new opportunity, that adds opportunities. It brings more people in. It gives more without taking anything away. It's a win-win solution.
Well, I would say, where do I go to park my car when the tour buses are there for that stage show? Just like the Hawaii Theater has shows, you're positing a revenue source. You're going to have competing users, and they're going to have the money. That's what it's going to take. You're going to have people filling those bleachers. There's tens of thousands of people in the hotels just down the road. They won't have any trouble filling that out for shows. And when that happens, my grandkids, they won't remember how it used to be.
Robert, yeah, I was going to say, can you rule out at this point as a policy the Hollywood aspect of it, as opposed to, I mean, how is it going to operate? You've got a big grandstand there that you're going to be maintaining, that you would want to use. How do you picture using that if it's not a revenue stream?
If it's not, well,
are you ruling out having to develop a revenue stream to maintain it? Okay. Talk about maintenance now.
So, no, like I said, we maintain all our parks, all our everything with taxpayer money. And so that's really right now in the foreseeable future, how we're going to continue to maintain this. Because as we talked about, it doesn't matter what the solution is, the maintenance has to happen, and it's going to be a cost. I'm not willing to guarantee anything about, you know, it not becoming somewhat commercialized, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to. And for that to happen would require more conversations. I mean, the EIS and the construction of this facility is not going to include uses of it in commercial type activities. So if for some reason, you know, 3 mayors down the road, they decide, you know what, we've got a facility there, we should use it for commercial activities, they would have to go through all kinds of public input, and everybody would have their say in the matter there.
No.
You remember also that this butts up right against Kapiolani Park, which is very strict about no commercialization. And so it would be extremely difficult to turn this venue into a commercial type activity.
But there are shows now 2 or 3 nights a week, commercial events at the aquarium. That never used to happen. There was no conversation about that. And it's just happening. That's how these things end up working. And so that's why we have to really look hard at it before you go down that road.
Okay, now let me get some more callers in here. Caller's father fought in the Philippines and said maintain natatorium was unnecessary. As a memorial, a beach would be a better memorial. Have you considered using the natatorium for ocean safety education for the keikis and tourists for programs like junior lifeguard training? Ocean Safety Ohana is asking that. What other positives, what other things do you see happening there? Kirsten, maybe you can weigh in. What would you like to see? What would you like to see a weekend at the natatorium look like?
I see it as a place for families gather where they are teaching keiki to swim, but also where it's a safe place perhaps with people with disabilities to enter the ocean and participate in ocean experiences. I think just as a viewpoint, looking out over the ocean and watching the ships and the sunset, I don't see it as a commercial venue. I see it as a community venue. And I think that offers a nice anchor to that part of Waikīkī, to that part of Kapiolani Park. I see it as an asset to the communities, an asset to the city and to the state. I just don't share this unwarranted fear of what might happen someday if we're not vigilant. I think we will be vigilant and we can guard against that.
Dolan, I've been giving you a break and not dragging you into this conversation, but I would like to hear your perspective. I mean, again, maybe less as an expert, more as a person who knows Waikīkī, knows the ocean, loves the ocean. What do you think about this? What thoughts come to mind when you have this conversation?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of take off my university hat for a minute and just tell you my personal opinion. And full disclosure, I used to be a city and county lifeguard for about 15 years.
Okay, that's where I knew you before.
I also,
I know this guy from somewhere,
I also recreate in this area with my family quite a bit, so I'm very familiar with the area. And I wanted to reflect on one of the comments that came from the viewer about having an ocean safety, some kind of headquarters or a station there. There's a lifeguard tower at Kaimana now. It's just a single person tower and they rotate through. And there is a lifeguard jet ski storage facility in the natatorium now. Regardless of whichever option we end up doing, I think it is a tremendous opportunity to create an ocean safety education center there. And the lifeguards could have a presence there. There could be water safety, junior lifeguard programs, as you mentioned. To me, that would be something I would really like to see happen in that area. It seems fitting. It would be something that the community would enjoy. So a multi-use area that could be part educational and bring the lifeguards into the fold.
Let me ask you another question that just occurred to me from your expert point of view. Pulling out that existing structure, cleaning up whatever stuff is there, is there any way of predicting what the beach would look like after doing that?
Yeah,
would we even have a beach?
That's a tough one. I think the sediment that's in there now is something that we maybe are underestimating how difficult it is to remove. When you try to remove really fine sediment like that, it gets everywhere. It's like dust. So that's something I think, regardless of whichever option we end up pursuing, that's something we're going to have to look at more closely. And it will need to be addressed, I think, because just leaving it, if you start to expose it to wave energy, it's going to start flushing and get around. And we've had some experience with that in Waikīkī in 2012. We did a beach nourishment project, and it turned out to be much more fine sediment than expected. And
I'm going to give
milky.
Jim one last word in, since it sort of seems to be 3-1. About 30 seconds.
I don't know. I think Dolan agreed with a lot of the points that we made. So
okay.
I'm somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. One thing I just throw out, even though we're running out of time, is that it occurs to me that Hanauma Bay is a good example of where there's a lot of commercial activity at Hanauma Bay associated with supporting people using it. Another day we'll talk about Hanauma Bay and whether it's appropriately being commercialized or too commercial. But anyway, I want to give everyone a chance to know how they can make their comments. We have a lot of comments from viewers. There is an address and email address you can send public comments to. The mailing address is to Mayor Kirk Caldwell, care of the Department of Design and Construction, which is basically Robert Croning, 650 South King Street, 11th floor, Honolulu, Hawaii 96813. You can also send an email to www.mcnatatorium@aecom.com. I think that's the consultant's email address. We will post these addresses at pbshawaii.org if you don't get them. And you can weigh in on what you think should be the future of the natatorium. And I want to thank all of you for joining us, and also our guest tonight, Robert Croning, the Director of the Honolulu City and County's Department of Design and Construction, Kirsten Faulkner, Executive Director of the Historic Hawaii Foundation, Dolan Eversole, Waikīkī Beach Management Coordinator for the University of Hawaii Sea Grant Program, and James Bickerton, Attorney representing the Kaimana Beach Coalition. This is the last Insights of 2018. Our next live show will be January 10th, when we will preview the 2019 legislative session. I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Happy holidays. A hui ho.